All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar Beis, the Schwarzbaum Family, in memory of Rabbi Aaron Schwarzbaum, Aharon Yosef ben Meir, zechus, Leah Sol, in the zechus of her daughter Ilana Bas Esther's successful surgery, complete and enduring refuah, a safe return of all of our hostages, and hatzlacha for our soldiers. Maia Hoffman, in memory of her father Reuven ben Emanuel, and the merit of hatzlacha, health, and joy for her entire family. Yoel Sara Kelman, in honor of the birth of their son, and in memory of Staff Sergeant David Sasson, Hashem yikom damo. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, all of the neshama and aliyah, the families in neshama, all of those who require refuah, should have one together with Kol Choli Yisrael. Each and every one of our hostages should be returned to their families and to their people, and our soldiers should have hatzlacha b'chol ma'aseh yedehem. But with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem, and just a lot to do today, but an incredible daf ahead of us. Today's daf is Chavchas 28, and we are picking up in Meir Hashem at Amarava 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 lines are from the bottom. Amarava Im Tim Silam Simanim Navdaraisa Hechi Majin Navidasa B'Simanim. Suppose if you remember again, we are in the midst of a raging machlokes. What's the raging machlokes? Our simanim da'oraisa or d'Rabbanan. Here's what we know. We've been operating since we entered into this beautiful paragraph of Metzia. We've been operating with the idea that obviously I lose an object, I go ahead, right? I lose an object, Reuven finds the object, I give Reuven a siman, and I get my object back. So we know that the providing of a siman ultimately works in order to allow for the restoration, for the giving back of an object. The shaila is, are simanim effective midrabanan or are simanim effective midaraisa? Now, let's remember again, the Gemara said, who cares? And the Gemara didn't say who cares, but you understand, it's a loose interpretation, right? Who cares? The Gemara says it matters a lot. Why? Because it depends what type. David, that's a huge mechayiv, having 8 ton at your table, no? Mamish, keeps you honest, having a lot of innocence. I feel that's been restored to that neighborhood over here. All right, so the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, what does it matter? It matters as to when you could go ahead and use simanim, right? If simanim are just Rabbanon, then perhaps again they will work in areas of mamon, of monetary matters, but they won't necessarily work in situations of Isser. Okay, so now that's a whole conversation. So Rav says like this: Imtim slamar simanim lav daraisa. If you hold that simanim are not daraisa, heichi majinan avedasa b'simanim. So Rav says, let's get back to basics. If simanim are not daraisa, then how could simanim be used to give back a lost object? That's what I'm saying. So I go ahead, and I lose an object. I go over to Reuven, right? Reuven goes in and announces he found something. I go over to Reuven, I give a siman. Reuven gives it back to me. If simanim don't work daraisa, then how is Reuven able to give it back to me and the lost object back to me with simanim? Simanim says, that's not a big deal. Actually, it's in Reuven the finders, right? It's in Reuven's best interest. And I will say, now what's driving Rava's question? I lose an object, right? Or I should say differently. Reuven finds an object. He announces the object, right? Because we'll talk about this in just a little bit. He says he found a cloak. I go over. I say, the cloak, it has a hole on the right-hand corner of the object. I give some type of siman mufak. Reuven gives it back to me. If simanim are not da'oraisa, then how is Reuven able to give the object back to me? After all, I will say, it's possible that what? I'm not the owner of the object. Maybe I happen to know the owner of the object. I saw the siman in the object, right? Shimon really owns it, but I know Shimon. Shimon is my neighbor. I saw that there's a hole in the right corner over there. I give the siman, I'm giving back the object. See, if you hold that siman madaraisa, then no, the Torah believes that whoever could furnish a siman is believed to be the owner. But if simanim are not daraisa, then how could Reuven give me back an object through a siman, and maybe I'm not the owner? In which case, Reuven is giving me property that I don't own through a mechanism that is not biblically sanctioned. So what's the pshat? To which the Gemara says, no. It's Reuven's interest. It's in Reuven's best interest. My Gemara gives an interesting answer. No, it's in Reuven. Reuven is Reuven the finder. It's in Reuven's best interest to give me back the object once I furnish simanim. Why? Because this way in the future, if Reuven loses something, he'll be able to get his object back with simanim. Interesting argument, right? In other words, that halacha l'maisa, the finder is willing to give back an object through simanim. Why? Because again, it's in his best interest that if he loses an object, somebody will return his object with simanim. You know what this is reminiscent of? It's reminiscent of the Gemara Maseches Ksubis, right? That says, why should you go to a levaya? Why should you go to a levaya? Because if you help bury people, people will help bury you. Right? A very like utilitarian process. Okay, makes a lot of sense, but it says the Gemara, Amar le Rav Safra, the Rava, v'chi adam also told the Yatzma v'mom she'eno shalo. So that's very nice, right? So you're telling him how it's in Reuven is the finder. So Reuven's best interest to give back the money, or to give back the object, so that if he ever loses something, his object will be returned. So in other words, so Reuven is allowed to give back something that may or may not belong to me, the person who's providing the simanim, because it'll benefit Reuven, the finder, in the long term, in the long run. So is a person allowed to do something that is personally beneficial to them with someone else's money? It doesn't make sense. Ella, let's watch this. Ella nechale labal aveda lemehav simanu lemishkale meide yada deedim lesle. So we'll say, listen to this. Rather, the Gemara says, no. It's not that it's beneficial to Reuven, the finder. It's beneficial to the owner of the object who lost his object to be able to reclaim his object with simanim. Why? Because we'll say, watch this. Made the other the Adam Leslie. So let's say again, I am the owner of the object who lost my object. I know I don't have Adam. In other words, we'll say, think about this just a moment. When you lose something, there's only really one of two ways to get it back. Right? What are the one of two ways? Either a siman or witnesses. Now we'll say, Bipashtos, most of us don't have witnesses that we own the things that we own. Right? In other words, so I lose an object. I don't have witnesses that I lost my object. So now, if you're going to set the bar up here, that in order to go ahead and reclaim a lost object, you have to furnish witnesses, I'm done. And we're all done for most things that we lost. Made the yada, the edim leslie. I know that I don't have witnesses. Umeima amar kuli amalo yadi simanim ufhakim didi dida va'ani ahev the simanim ufhakim dida v'shaklin Allah. So I will say this is incredible. So Rava says the concept. Right? Even if you don't hold that simanim daraisa, right? Even if you don't hold that simanim daraisa, halacha l'maisa, it's in the I was going to say it's in the loser's best interest, but that doesn't sound right. Right? It's in the owner's, right? In the owner's best interest to get his object back with simanim, because again, I will say the owner says like this: I'm okay. I'm willing to take the risk that maybe someone else knows simanim in my object. Because that's such a far-fetched possibility. But here's what I do know. I don't have Eidim. I don't have Eidim about the stuff that I own. So if I need Eidos, I'm not going to get back my object. I'm trusting the fact that no one really knows the simanim mufhakim of my object other than me. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, simanim will be an effective mechanism for the retrieval of a lost object. And lav dafka, that means that simanim are da'araisa. Okay, fascinating. And the hadisnan, what about that which we learned before? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, Echad halova mishlosha yachzir lelova, shlosha shalava mina echad yachzir lemalva. So we'll say, remember again, we spoke about this before, that halacha l'maisa, right? Let's say again, I'm walking down the street and I find 3 loan documents that name the same borrower, or 3 loan documents that name the same lender. What do you do in that case? You return the 3 loan documents to the same borrower, right? In other words, that's what happens. Or you return the loan documents to the same named lender. The Gemara says in that case, does the borrower appreciate you returning the documents to the lender? Not necessarily. He said, no, both say that case is a svara case. So the Gemara says, Echad halava mishlosh yachzer lelova, the gabe lova shrichi, gabe malva lo shrichi. The Gemara says, Shmamina malva nafol shlosha, shalavu me'echad yachzer lemalva, the gabe malva shrichi, gabe lova lo shrichi. Then I will say, don't bring any raya from that borrower and lender case. That's svara. What's the svara? What's the logic? If you find a bundle of documents, I will say, that name the same borrower. So there's two possibilities. What are the two possibilities? That three different lenders lost their documents in the same place, right? Or that one borrower lost his three documents in the same place. Which one is there a greater statistical probability for? That one borrower. Same thing, reverse case. Right? You find three documents that name the same lender. So there are two possibilities. Possibility one is that three different borrowers lost their document in the same place. Or possibility two is that one lender lost his document in the same place, right? Or his documents. So we'll say, so there it's svara that we go with the idea that it's one borrower and one lender. Incredible. Top of Chavchas. So we'll say, so again, our question is still unresolved. Are simanim da'oraisa or simanim d'Rabbanan? Elahadisna and motzatachlis shel shtaros or aguda shel shtaros. We'll say, if I find a pile of shtaros, documents, loan documents, or a bundle, harizi yachzir, you have to give it back to the owner of the documents. So the Gemara says, hachenami delechale lelove la'adur le'lemalbas. We'll say, so in that case, we give the documents back to the creditor. So the Gemara says, 1 second. So we'll say, the Gemara is operating under the premise that the reason we return an object with simanim is because a person wants the object returned with simanim, because often they don't have eidos. But look at a case like this, where you find a pile of documents. What's halacha? Again, obviously there's more to this case. That lamaisa, we're going to give it back to the creditor. Now tell me, in this case, is it in the best interest of the borrower that you're giving the loan, that you're giving the documents back to the creditor? No. So this is a case where it's disadvantageous to return it. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Allah Amar Rava, simanim daraisa. Rava says, you're right. The concept of returning a lost object with simanim has nothing to do with who it is beneficial for. Right? Nothing to do with that. So the Gemara says, rather Rava says, simanim are daraisa. Simanim are daraisa. Tichsev v'haya imcha adrosh achicha oso. So the pasuk says that ultimately the object will remain with your brother until he seeks it out. Until he seeks it out. Rabbi says, quote in the Mishnah, but would I ever think that I'm going to give back an object to my brother before he seeks it out? Right? In other words, would there be a concept of a proactive returning of an object? Now, the truth is, there could be a concept of a proactive returning of an object. When is that? When you explicitly know who the owner is. Right? I know that this is Reuven's object, so of course I don't have to wait for Reuven to come to me. I could give it back to him. That's Hashavas Aveda. So the Gemara says, Ella darshehu im ramaihu o eno ramai. So Rabbi says, so rather, what does the pasuk teach? What does it mean adrosh achicha? So this is fascinating. Rabbi say, adrosh achicha doesn't mean only give back the object when your brother asks you for it. That's kind of obvious. Rather, what it means is drosh achicha means investigate the person claiming the object, right? If I find something and I announce it, someone claims, says, "Hey, that's my item." Fine, investigate him. Investigate the claim. How do you do that? So the Gemara says, So the Gemara says, So how do you do that? How do you investigate? Right? So I find an object, I announce it. Reuven shows up and says, "Hey, that's my object." Shabbos says, the Torah says, Adrosh achicha, investigate the claim. How do you investigate the claim? Simanim. Right? So we'll say, so what do you see from here? Shmamina, the Gemara says, you see from here that halacha l'maisa, simanim are da'oraisa. Simanim are da'oraisa, and the request for a siman before you return an object, that is the way that the finder investigate the veracity of the claim of Reuven who's showing up. So Rabbi says, so it appears that right now the Gemara has come to the conclusion that simanim are in fact right. So Rabbi say, it's such a fascinating thing and such an incredible metaphor for life as well, which is, you would think that on one hand, I find an object, I announce it, Reuven shows up, he says, it's mine. Why not trust? Because they will say, as a wise man once said, right? Trust but verify, right? So, in other words, that at the end of the day, the way life works is you have to assume, right? Is that the way it goes? Trust but verify.
Reagan.
Yeah. Right. So let's say, so Lemaisa, you have to have a sense of trust in people. In other words, there are some people who walk around in life feeling that every single person has an angle and is out to get them, right? In other words, everyone always has an agenda. So the truth is, everyone always does have an agenda, but that doesn't mean that they're out to give it to me, right? In other words, we all have an agenda. That's the way it works in life. But lav dafka, that my agenda puts you at a disadvantage. So it's this interesting idea that on one hand, you have to trust people, but you also have to verify. You also have to verify. You also write, in other words, so I find an object, I announce it, Reuven shows up, and Reuven looks like such a nice, able guy. Okay, what's the simon? What's the simon? It's this very fine dynamic in our interpersonal relationships. Know how to trust people, but at the same time also recognize that unfortunately dishonesty does exist. So protect yourself against that in some way as well. Incredible. Let's go back there. Amar Rava. Imtim siman daraisa. So Rava says, if you want to say it's siman daraisa, so Rava says, imtim silomar hapashad le siman daraisa. So what do you mean if you want to say siman daraisa? We just proved that simanim are daraisa. Mishum de ikalamimar kiddushanina. And the Gemara says, no, because we also remember again, we had this drasha before. And the Gemara wanted to suggest that maybe you really need eidim. Rather, simanim, so fine. So I'll say, so now, bottom line is, here's the great news. It is only about 15 minutes into Shir, and Baruch Hashem, we have established a major nugget of halacha l'maisa, which is, simanim are daraisa. Where do you learn out? This is what I want you to know from today's daf, in addition to 15 other things, which we'll get to. But number one, simanim are da'oraisa. Simanim are biblical. Where do you know that simanim are da'oraisa? Ad derosh achicha. That phrase that we interpret as always meaning, right? Hold on to the object until your friend seeks it out. The Gemara says that's obvious. No. What it means is hold on to the object, ad derosh achicha, until you investigate the claim of your brother. How do you investigate the claim of the guy showing up, claiming that the object is his? You ask him for a simon. And I will say again, as we've established also, it's not just any simon, but it's what we call a simon mufhak. A simon mufhak. It's got to be something significant that really only the owner would know, right? So a guy comes up and says, "Oh, I lost a pair of tzitzis." And he says, yeah, it has strings on four corners. Right? You're like, okay, shkaya, thank you, take a hike, buddy. Right? So I mean, you don't have to say it like that, but you understand. Right? So the idea is it's got to be a siman mufak, something unique in the object that only the owner would know. Good, I will say, some really interesting cases here. Simanim v'simanim. So I will say, watch this. This is exciting. I'm walking down the street. I find an object. Let's just call it a cloak, because that's the Gemara uses. A cloak. Fine. We'll say what happens. Two guys, and I announce it. And we're going to see about say, by the way, remember we had the machlokes about when you find an object, what do you announce? Do you just announce, I found an object, or do you announce the object? We're going to say the Rambam paskins that you announce the object. I found a cloak. And now that's all you say. I found the cloak. Watch this. Reuven and Shimon show up, and they both provide simanim. Incredible, right? Simanim v'simanim. So we'll say what happens there. Simanim v'simanim yaniach. So we'll say in that case, I can't give the object to either of them. So what do? I leave it until Eliyahu Hanavi comes. Now both say, now the truth is, from the finder's perspective, that's not good. Why? Because now that means I am literally responsible to watch that object until Mashiach comes. Right? Which, okay, that's sometimes, that's what you have to do. But Lamais again, so in this case, Reuven and Shimon are both showing up and giving a simon. So halacha Lamais again, I can't give it to either of them. Yaniach, holds on to it till Eliyahu comes. Next, Simanim ve'edim. Ooh, interesting. So I'll say, so again, all the same case. I find the cloak, I announce, I found the cloak. Reuven and Shimon shows up. Reuven shows up and he gives a simon. Right? Shimon shows up and he brings edim that the object is his. So what's halacha? Yinasin labala edim. So I'll say, so in that case, edim wins over Simon. Edim wins over Simon, give the object to Shimon. Next, simanim v'simanim ve'ed echad. Interesting. Right? Same case, but Reuven shows up, Reuven has simanim, Shimon shows up and Shimon has simanim and one witness. So what's the halacha? Eid echad kamandale, seidami v'yaniach. So we'll say, so again, in this case, Eid Echa means nothing, and this is a case of simanim versus simanim. And what do you do in simanim versus simanim? What do? You leave it until Eliyahu Navi comes. Next, we'll say first wide line. Eidi arika ve'eidi nefila. Oh, interesting. Reuven shows up, and Reuven has witnesses that he wove the cloak. And Shimon has witnesses that he dropped the cloak. So who gets it? So the Gemara says, Tinasin Hy'd nefila. You give it to Shimon, who has the witnesses that he dropped it. Why? Da'aminon zabune zabno umeinish achrina nafal. I will say, having proof that you wove it is not necessarily proof of ownership. Why? I will say, right, edus that you wove it, what does that tell you? That Reuven made it. But it's also that Reuven made it, and what did he do? He sold it. In other words, having witnesses that you wove it is not proof of ownership. Versus having witnesses that you dropped it indicates that in fact you did own it. Midas arkol, midas rachbo. Watch this. Reuven shows up and Reuven gives the length and Shimon gives the width. So whose simon is stronger? So the Gemara says, Tinasi midas arko. So you give it ultimately again to Reuven, who has the length. Why? The midas rachbo she'uri kameshayerle kad nichsi beimara v'kai midas arko lo mishtarele. So this is interesting. So apparently, it's easier to eyeball the width of an object than it is the length. So we'll say, if you can imagine this, like I was thinking about this, like with a scarf or like with a cloak. So again, you could identify the thickness of it just by eyeballing it, or at least some people could do that. The length of it is a little bit more complicated. Why? Because the person is wearing it might have it folded over. So therefore, again, interestingly enough, length is a greater siman than width. Next, midas are called midas rachbo, umidas gamyav. So we'll say, watch this. Reuven shows up, and Reuven gives a siman. He knows the length and the width of the object. Shimon knows the combined area of the object, the combined size of the object, without knowing the distinction between length and width. Who gets it? Yinasi midas arkol v'rachbo. So we'll say in that case, Reuven gets it, because knowing the independent length and width is greater than knowing the total area of the garment. Midas arkol, midas rachbo, midas mishkalosa. Interesting. Reuven shows up and Reuven gives the length and the width of the garment. Shimon shows up and Shimon gives the weight of the garment. Who gets it? Yinasin midas mishkalosa. Weight is a greater siman than length and width. Who omer simani I get? The omer simani. What's another case? I'm walking down the street. I find the get, the document, right? Which says that Reuven divorced Rachel. I announce, I found the get. Who shows up? Reuven and Rachel. Reuven gives a siman. Rachel gives a siman. Who do I give the get back to? So the Gemara says, Yinasin la. Ultimately, again, you give the get back to Rachel. Why? The Gemara said, B'mai. So what kind of siman is Rachel giving? So we'll say, if Rachel is giving the length or the width, we'll say, maybe she just saw the document. In other words, he's writing the document and she saw it. So maybe because she saw it, halacha again, she just knows it, but that's lav dafka that she ever actually possessed it. Ella, nekav yesh b'tzad os ploni. So we'll say, rather, again, what's the type of siman that would give it back to her? She says, there's a hole by the reish of my name. On the top of the letter, on top of the reish of Rachel, there's a hole in the document. Such specificity she would only know of what? If she was in possession of the actual document itself. What happens if he gives a siman, I will say, regarding the thread that holds the document together? Right? And she gives a siman regarding the thread. Yinasin law. You give the get back to her. Gemara says, well, what's the siman? If we're talking about that she gives a siman about the color of the thread, maybe when he was writing the get, she saw the color of the thread and that was it. Ella, b'midas arko. Rather, I saw at the length of the thread, something so specific she would only know if it was in her possession. Hu omer v'chafisa. V'yomer b'chafisa. We'll say, let's say again, so same case, I'm walking down the street, I find the get, I announce I find the get, Reuven and Rachel both show up claiming that it is theirs, right? And independently, they both give the same siman. He says, the get was contained in a leather bag. Okay. She says, the get was contained in a leather bag. Obviously, they're not saying this in front of each other. They're both giving it, but they're both giving the same siman. Who do I give it to? Yinasin lo. I give it back to him. Why? My taima. May the yada dechol ma de isla bechafisahu de manachle. It will say, it could very well be that Reuven normally puts his documents in a leather bag, right? A little leather satchel. And so she knows this. So because she knows this, it's not necessarily assuming the get. Okay, so both sides. So therefore, what do we come out? What do we come out with over here? Halacha l'maisa, simanim arda oraisa. That's number one. That's how we paskin. How do we know that? How do we know that? Ad dirosh achicha. That's number one. We'll say number two. When you announce a lost object, you announce the object you lost, or you found, I should say. In other words, I don't say I found an object. Rather, I go ahead and I say I found a cloak, I found the ring, I found the watch, whatever it is. So we'll say those are the two major pieces of halacha l'maisa. Okay, we'll leave the rest. We'll leave the rest. So much more to talk about over here, but let's go back there. Mishnah. Here we go. I must say, this is really, really interesting. So, I find an object. So now I know again, Siman Madaraisa, and I'm going to announce the type of object that I lost. How long am I obligated to announce an object for before keeping it for myself? Right? In other words, can't be forever. How long are you obligated to go ahead and announce an object for? So, Meir says, until the neighbors know about it. Okay, we'll define what that means in just a moment. Till the neighbors know about it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer shalosh regalim. Rabbi Yehuda says, you have to announce it for 3 regalim. 3 regalim. That wasn't obviously, again, when Rabbi Yehuda speaks out regalim, this is obviously talking about the times of the Beis HaMikdash, where everybody's gathering in Yerushalayim in the Beis HaMikdash for Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Listen to this. Va'acha haregel ha'acharon shiva yomim. So Rabbi Yehuda says like this: you announce that you found a lost object for 3 regalim, and after the end of the 3rd regel, you wait another 3 days. Kadesh yelech lebeso shlosha v'yachzor shlosha v'yachriz yom echad. In order that what? In order, I will say that people from Yerushalayim have 3 days to go home, check their stuff to see if they lost an object, 3 days to come back, and then 1 more day to sort this out, literally to announce. So we'll say, see, hear this? So in Rabbi Yehuda's model, I find a lost object, I need again to announce it over the course of 3 regalim, and I will say, now here's what's interesting. The duration of that all depends on when you found the object. In other words, we'll say, if I find it Erev Pesach, so then there's Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, right? Or if I find it Purim, right? There's the month before Pesach, and then Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. But 3 regalim, and then after the last regel, 1 more week. 1 more week. Now I will say, now what's the logic there? Because I'm announcing it, somebody heard it, look, they said Silber found the cloak. The truth is, you know what, I have a whole bunch of cloaks at home. I don't know, did I lose my cloak, not lose my cloak? I need 3 days to get home and 3 days to get back if it turns out that I lost my cloak, and then 1 day to sort all of this out. Incredible. All right, so I'll say, let's analyze. So Tana. So I'll say, let's go to Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says you have to announce the object long enough for the neighbors to know. So are the lashon of shchenav, the neighbors. So Meir says, Tana, shchene aveda. It's the neighbors of the lost object. So the Meir says, my shchene aveda. What does it mean, neighbors of the lost object? If it means the owners of the person who lost the object, it will say now, if I know the neighbors of the owner of the lost object, then b'pashtus, what does that mean? I know the owner of the lost object. If I know the owner of the lost object, give him back his item. Ella, no, rather, what does it mean? It means I have to announce it for the neighbors of who are in proximity of where I found it. See, what's interesting over here is Rabbi Meir assumes that makom is significant, location is significant, which means by pashtos, if you find a lost object, the statistical probability is that who is that object lost by? By people in the proximity. So therefore, again, you have to just announce what you found long enough that people in the neighborhood where the object was found become aware of it. And as a result, ultimately, again, become aware of it. Good. Rabbi Yehuda says, well, say this is such an incredible Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? You have to announce it for 3 regalim, and a week after the last regal. That's how long you have to wait. So let's go. Here we go. Incredible. Or minhum. Gemara says, I don't understand. I will say, when do we begin to say the same tal umatir livracha, which is ultimately, again, the request for rain in Barech Halinu? When do we begin to say that? On the 3rd of Cheshvan. The 3rd of Cheshvan. But by the way, I just want to also point out something very interesting, not a topic for today. You know, we often think Mar Cheshvan is a descriptive name because there are no Yamim Tovim in the month of Cheshvan. In fact, you see from Chazal that the original given name of the month was Mar Cheshvan. That's the name of the month. That's the name of the month. What happened that it was subsequently shortened to Cheshvan afterwards, discussion, but you see the month itself referred to by Chazal, not even as Mar Cheshvan. All right, the Gemara says, Rabbi Gamliel says, no, you begin to say the same TALMUD livracha on the 7th of Cheshvan. Now why? Shutesvav Yom Achar Achad. Listen to this. The 7th of Cheshvan is exactly 2 weeks after the end of Sukkot, the last day of Sukkot. Why do you need 2 weeks? Because also listen to this. It would take 2 weeks to travel from Yerushalayim to the furthest outlying Jewish community in Eretz Yisrael, which abutted the Euphrates. So now what is the Gemara showing you? That it takes 2 weeks for people to get home from Yerushalayim to the furthest outlying Jewish community in Eretz Yisrael. 2 weeks, not 3 days. What's going on? Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah says it takes after Yom Tov is over, it takes 3 days for a person to get home to the furthest outlying community, 3 days for a person to get back, and then 1 more day to sort it out. 3 days. It takes 2 weeks. This is incredible, by the way. Incredible. So therefore, we do not begin to say the same TALMUD livracha until the 7th of Cheshvan, which is 2 weeks after the end of Yom Tov. Why, Rabbi Hossein? Because we don't want anyone getting stuck in the rain coming home from the pilgrimage festival on Sukkot. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that incredible? What do you see from here? You see what I'm saying? Now, you'll say to yourself, really? Eretz Yisrael needs rain. I saw Reuven's wagon is going to get stuck in the mud. Who cares? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Now, that is generally true. I will say, but you see from here the tremendous sensitivity that the halacha has towards each and every individual. It's incredible. So therefore, we will sooner delay the actual petition for rain by a little bit more, by 2 weeks, so that a Yid should be able to get home. We'll say it's also a practical consequence that if people know they're going to get stuck in the rain on the way back after Yom Tov, what could very easily happen? They're not going to come. And for a Yid to lose out on the opportunity to come to Yerushalayim or HaKodesh on the Yom Tovim, that would be terrible. So we delay the request of the rain. The idea being, it takes 2 weeks to get home, not 3 days. So what's going on over here? Rabbi says, incredible Gemara. Amrav Yosef lo kasha, kama mikdash rishon, kama mikdash sheni. I will say, listen to this. The 2 weeks was during the times of the first Beis HaMikdash. The 3 days during the times of the second Beis HaMikdash. What does this mean? Mikdash rishon, the nefisha Yisrael tuva, tichsib b'hu Yehuda v'Yisrael rabim kechal asher alayam l'rov, bo'inan kulehai. In the times of the first Beis HaMikdash, where Baruch Hashem, Klal Yisrael was numerous like the sand by the ocean, so there were many more communities, and it took 2 weeks for a person in the outermost community to get out from Yerushalayim. But Mikdash Sheni delo nefishe Yisrael tuva dichsiv kol hakahal ke'echad arba ravo alofim shvavim osashishim lo ba'ina kolihai. There was the times in the second Beis HaMikdash where the Jewish community in Eretz Yisrael was much smaller. Remember again, I was saying, many Jews did not leave Bavel when given the opportunity to come back to Eretz Yisrael. Hurts to say those words a little bit. It hurts historically and it hurts contemporarily. Right? So the idea over here is there was a much smaller Jewish population in Eretz Yisrael during times of the Second Temple. So because of that, again, it only took 3 days to get back to the outermost community. Limar is 1 second. Armand the Abayi v'haksiv v'yashuva akanim alaviyim v'amishor v'asharon v'chol Yisrael b'areim v'chevan dahachi hu ipcha b'stabra. But I will say, but it doesn't sound that way. It sounds like halacha l'maisa. It sounds like there were a lot of people who came back during the second Beis HaMikdash as well. Now, maybe not as many as First Temple era, but still a lot of people. So the Gemara says as follows: Mikdash Rishon, Dinefishe Yisrael Tuva, the mitzvahs alma, u'mishtachach shayarte de azli bin bima ben balayla, lo ben eklayim. Furthermore, the Gemara says the truth is, your logic should be just the opposite. If during the times of the first Beis HaMikdash, there were so many people But if there are so many people, what does that mean? What does that mean? That there must have been better transportation. That there are caravans that are traveling by day and by night. If there are if there are caravans traveling by day and by night, then what Rabbi say? Then what should that mean? That should mean that it should take less time to get home. And therefore, again, 3 days should have been enough to get to the furthest far-flung community. Mikdash Sheni, Delo Nefishe Yisrael Tuva. But in terms of the second base of Mikdash, where perhaps again there wasn't as great of a Jewish population, right? Then you should have required 2 weeks. So in the second base of Mikdash, where again there weren't as many people, which means that halacha l'maisa again transportation was not as good, it would take 2 weeks to get home. So what's going on? So Rava Amar Loshna Mikdash Rishon Loshna Mikdash Sheni Lo Hitrichu Rabbanon Ba'aveda Yoser Midai. So Rava says it's apples and oranges. You're right. It would have taken 2 weeks probably to get home, right? To get home. First thing is second base of Mikdash, but two separate halachas. In general, when it comes to the same TALMUD livracha, Chazal didn't institute it until the 7th of Mar Cheshvan. I will say, by the way, that's halacha l'maisa in Eretz Yisrael. They begin to say the same TALMUD livracha on the 7th of Cheshvan. Why? Because during the times of the Beis HaMikdash, and Meir said during the times of the third Beis HaMikdash, we want to give people time to get home without getting stuck in the rain. So I will say, Aveda is something totally different. By Aveda, Chazal understood there's only so much you can ask of the finder, right? Until the finder says, you know what, I don't need this. So as it is, right, what are you doing? As it is, what you're telling him, you need to announce over the course of 3 regalim that you found an object. After that third regal, finder is about done. He's about done. So what do we tell? So we'll say, now you're going to lap on another 2 weeks to that, or add on another 2 weeks to that. You can't do that. So instead what we say is 7 days. 7 days, 3 days to get home, 3 days to get back. So essentially Rava says, Chazal just relaxed the standards a little bit for the finder. Incredible. Ravina, Shmamina, Ki Machriz Glima Machriz. So Ravina says, by the way, what do you see from here? That when you find an object and you announce it, what do you announce? You announce, I found a cloak. Your announcement is item specific. So we'll say, because again, if you're only announcing I found the lost object, then you'd have to add on another day to the 7. Why? Because then a person needs 3 days to get home, 1 day to take inventory of all their stuff. Did I lose something? Another 3 days to get back, and then 1 day to sort this out. It would be 8 days instead of 7. So we'll say, rather, what do you see from here? We already established this before, that when the finder finds the object and he announces it, the announcement itself is item specific. So the Rava Lishitaso says, maybe not. Maybe the announcement is generic. It takes a person more time to take inventory of all their stuff. Okay, Chazal relaxed the obligation vis-a-vis the finder. Tan Rabbanon, Regal Rishon, Omer Regal Rishon, Regal Sheni, Omer Regal Sheni, Regal Shlishi, Omer Stam. Let's listen to this. When the finder makes the announcement, so what does he say? Right, let's go in order. He says, on Pesach, I found the cloak, and this is the first regal, I'm announcing it. Right, Shavuos, I found the cloak. This is the second regal, I'm announcing it. Sukkis, I found the cloak. Done. No announcement that it is the third regal. Why? The Gemara says, Va'amai, Lechosh, Va'amai, Lema regal shishi. Balance then, just say it's the third regal. So the Gemara says, Lo asilach lufe b'sheni. We're concerned that it'll get it mixed up, or people will get it mixed up with the second. He said shlishi. Someone heard sheni. So they think they have more time. This way, if he doesn't say anything, everyone knows that it's the third regal. And we'll say, again, remember, there's an urgency in the third regal. Why is there urgency in the third regal? Right? Because again, remember, this is the last one, and then the 7 days afterwards. We'll say also tremendous Mr. Haskell. Sometimes in life, the way to make a point is to not say anything. Right? We go ahead and we assume that if you need to make a point about something, you got to articulate it. No. Sometimes I will say there is tremendous statements that are made with silence. So over here, he doesn't say anything, right? In other words, he announces the cloak. He says again, but he doesn't say it's the third Yom Tiv or the third regal. People know. So he says, Sheni Nami, Sheni Nami, Asidach Lufe Berishon. But 1 second, if you're concerned about confusion, so when he announces Sheni, maybe people will get that confused with Rishon. Haka asi regal shlishi. That's not a big deal because we'll say even if you do get 1 and 2 mixed up, the good news is there's still 3. Okay. Tanabaram. Parishon komishon otzavide machres ala shlosh regalim va'achar regal achron shivas yamim kedei sheyelich shlosh v'yachres yom echad. So we'll say in the beginning. Now, what does in the beginning mean? During the times of the Beis Hamikdash. During the times of the Beis Hamikdash, what would happen? A person would go ahead and go through the model that we saw of Rabbi Huda in the Mishnah. Namely, that Allah might announce it for 3 regalim. And then after the last regal, another week, 3 days to get home, 3 days to get back, 1 day to sort this out. Mishecharav Beis Hamikdash. When the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Sheyibane b'mheira b'yameinu. And may it be rebuilt speedily in our days. Amen v'amen. Hiskinu shemachrizim b'batei knesios or batei midrashos. So what's this incredible halacha? So now, when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Chazal switched to halacha. Where do you announce that you found the lost? Where do you announce it? Shuls, Beis Medrash, batei knesios, misherabu ha'anosim. Right, so I'll say now what happens when the extortionists, right, proliferated. Now I'll say hiskinu shemodin l'shchinav u'miliyuda v'dayo. So what happened? The extortionists, we'll get to it in just a moment, the extortionists would walk around shuls, right? And they'd be listening for who's announcing lost objects, and they would take it by force. So when that happened, Chazal changed halacha again. You don't announce it in shul. Rather, what do? You kind of just spread the word amongst, again, the neighbors and people in the know. Rabbi said this goes back to what we saw before Rabbi Meir, that halacha of shchinav. You kind of just announce it in the area where the object was lost. So the Gemara said, "My mishra ba'anas." What does it mean when the anas and the extortionists proliferated? The amri avirit alamalka. So I will say, extortionists were the people who kind of worked for the government, who were claiming that any lost object belongs to the government, belongs to the king. So they would walk around, and if somebody would be making an announcement about a lost object, they would claim it for the king. I will say, it's going to tell us, Rabbi Ami ashkech odya de dinari. Rabbi Ami found a container, a utensil filled with gold coins. So the Gemara says, Chaziyahu Barnash, the Kamara says, there was another guy, a non-Jew, a Gentile there, and he saw that Rabbi Ami was shaking. Why is Rabbi Ami shaking? Because Rabbi Ami got scared, right? Rabbi Ami got scared that this guy wasn't honest, he wasn't extortionist, and he was going to take the object. Amrle, so the Gentile said to him, Zil shakol enafshecha. No, you can keep it. It's money, I'm not taking it from you. He says, why? Delav parsai anan. Right? I'm not a Persian. Sorry. Right? I'm not a Persian. Right? I'm not a Persian. So the Gemara says, Amri avidet al-malka. So we'll say, here's what's interesting. So apparently, it was the Persians who would claim everything for the monarchy. So apparently the Romans didn't do this. So this guy was a Roman. He says, Rabbi Ami, don't worry. Rabbi Ami, don't worry about it, right? Lamaisa, I'm a Roman, not a Persian. You're fine. Tanabanan, okay? We'll say first white line. Evan Toin Haisen Yushalayim. Ultimately, we'll say there was a claiming stone. Now, what's the claiming stone? We'll say, so this is actually incredible. This Evan Toin, we'll say, was literally, again, like essentially, it's a lost and found. It's a lost and found. There was a Beis Hamikdash. There was a lost and found in the Beis Hamikdash. We'll say, can you imagine what's going to be on the loudspeaker, right? In the Bayish Shlish of the Beis Hamikdash? Will the Schwarzbaum family please come and reclaim their child? That is right. It's like who knows? It's going to be like great adventure on Chalamayid, right? Times 1,000. It's going to be incredible. So Gemara goes out. So Gemara says like this. There was like a lost and found. Evan literally means like a claiming rock. Whoever lost something would go there. So we'll say quite literally it was the lost and found. If you lost something, if you found something, so so if you found something, you would stand up, you would announce, right? Lamaisa, I found something. Someone else would go ahead and give their simanim, v'notla, and shalom Yisrael. So what's the Gemara over here is making reference to the story of Choni HaMa'agel, right? Remember again with the whole rain, right? It started pouring, and ultimately again they wanted Choni to stop davening for rain. So Choni said, has the lost and found stone disintegrated? If that's disintegrated, then I'll start, which of course it didn't. Stone wouldn't disintegrate. So essentially what Choni was saying was, I can daven for rain. I can't daven for rain to stop. Right? You can daven for bracha, you can't daven to shkoyach. Right? Beautiful. Mishnah. Amar esavedelo, Amar simonelo, yitinlo. Both say this Gemara Gerrit is crazy good. So listen to this. I find an object. Reuven shows up and Reuven says Reuven claims it, but he doesn't give a siman. Lo yitin lo. I don't have to give Reuven the object. V'haramai. Both say, what happens if someone has a reputation as a ramai? Someone has a reputation ultimately again as a dishonest person. What's the halacha? Afapi she'amar simoneha lo yitin lo. So both say this is pretty wild. If Reuven has a reputation as a ramai, even though Reuven gives me a siman, I don't give him back the object. Shene'amar adrosh achicha also. Both says the pasuk was the same Joshua we saw before, right? You hold on to the object until your brother seeks it out from you. Ad shetidrosh es achicha im ramai hu im eno ramai. So we darshan it to mean I have to investigate: is my friend honest or not honest? So we'll say, Baba, do you hear what the Mishnah is saying? Hear what the Mishnah is saying? That Allah if Reuven is known to be a ramai, even if he gives simanim, I don't give it back to him. I will say, what a tremendous Musar Haskell, which is, I will say, that sometimes we create identities for ourselves, and those identities almost create a reality independent of ourselves. Reuven has dug such a hole for himself, right? He's self-identified as a Rama as a result of his actions, that even though now he gives a siman, we don't trust him. I have more about that in the Gemara. Let's see. Itmar, Rav Yehuda Amar Vidita Machris. Rav Nachman Amar Glima Machris. Let's see, this is Machlokes you had before. When I find an object, what am I announcing? Rabbi Yehuda says you make an item-specific announcement. Rav Yehuda says you make a generic announcement. I found a lost object. Rav Nachman says no, you make an item-specific announcement. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Avedeta Machris. Rabbi Yehuda says you just make a generic announcement. Di'i Amrit Glima Machris Cheshin Ramai. Rabbi Yehuda is concerned about say that's what. Rabbi Yehuda is concerned that Allah Chalamaysa, if you make an item-specific announcement, then what? It opens you up to unscrupulous individuals. Right? So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman Galima Machris L'Ramai Lo Chashinon. Nachman says, no. If I'm just announcing Galima, remember again, Reuven who shows up still has to give me a siman mufhak. So if you have to give a siman mufhak, that's enough of a mechanism to ensure that no one is falsely claiming it. The imkain im l'davar sof. Because we'll say, if you're going to be choshesh that a Ramai has a siman mufhak, then there's no end to this. So Tanan, Amar Asade, Devalo Amar Simoneha, Harizelo Yitino. So we'll say, what did the Mishnah say? Right? If Reuven shows up, and Reuven just goes out and says, yes, I lost the cloak, but he doesn't give Simonim, I don't give it to Reuven. Now, so we'll say, if you say that when I make the announcement, just make a generic announcement, so we'll say, the Mishnah is coming to teach me, I make an announcement, right? I found an object. Reuven shows up and says, it was a cloak, right? I went ahead and I lost the cloak. So then it makes sense to say that even though Reuven identified the object, if he can't give a siman, I don't give it back to him. But if you say that halacha l'maisa, you make an item-specific announcement, so how does this work? Amar ihu glima, va'amar ihu glima, tzricha l'meimar, kilo amar simana l'madrin. So if I'm making an item-specific announcement, so I announced, I found the cloak. So now what is the Mishnah teaching me? Reuven shows up, and what does Reuven say? Oh, I lost the cloak. So you never have one of those conversations with people where you're just looking at each other and no one understands what's happening over here. Right? So I announced that I lost the cloak. Reuven shows up and says, hey, Reuven here, right? I lost the cloak. Yeah, I know. I just said I found the cloak, right? So you saying you lost the cloak so the Mishnah has to tell me that I don't give it back to him. That's obvious. The Safra says no. Really? We'll say when announcing an object, you make an item-specific announcement. The Gemara says, right? Amar iu glima v'amar iu simanim. I'm sorry. Amar Safra li'olam glima machris. Amar iu glima v'amar iu simanim. So the Gemara says, so therefore halacha l'maisa, if I announce the cloak, if Reuven shows up, if Reuven gives a siman, then I give it back to him. Umay lo amar simaneha. What does it mean when it says that Reuven did not go ahead and give a siman? Lo amar siman muvhakin dida or didei. So the Gemara says, you're right. Halacha l'maisa, the way it works is, Rabbi say, and we already saw this before, that halacha l'maisa, the announcement is an item-specific announcement. So I announce, I found the cloak. Reuven's job, if Reuven wants to reclaim the object, what does he have to do? He needs to give me a siman mufak. If he doesn't give me a siman mufak, I don't give it back to him. And we'll say the Ramai. So this is incredible. We'll say what the Mishnah now introduced me to is when it comes to a Ramai, even if a Ramai gives a siman mufak, this is incredible, I don't give the object back to him. In the beginning, when someone used to go, we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up, don't worry, tomorrow's even longer. Right? So don't worry about it. We're fine. No, Amud Aleph for sure. We'll be absolutely fine. I will say, by the way, tell me that this Gemara is not Olam Haba. This is not Olam Haba. This is such great Gemara. Every piece, halacha l'maisa, hashkaf l'maisa. Emir Hashem, the adventure continues tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, Chavran Zoom. Have a great day, everyone. Wonderful to see everyone.